Hi, it's Steve Hargadon, and we are very well into day 2 of the Global Education. We are recording, and there are some reminders from Lucy. There's this new great chat feature on the front of the globaleducationconference.com website. You can ask questions. You can find out what's going on. There's also the GlobalEd13 Twitter hashtag. Do note that there are surveys that pop up at the end of each session. We know that you're not going to fill in every survey, but when you have a thought or some feedback, please do let us know. We particularly appreciate it. Nonprofits and schools are welcome to be partners of the conference. We promote you and ask that you promote us. It's a nice, lovely, symbiotic, and free relationship. Hope you'll consider doing that. And then we've got some great conversation going on the Global Education Conference network site, especially around our convocation ideas, the Global Education Declaration concept, and the 5 projects that were started. Thanks so much to our conference sponsors and supporters. Especially we appreciate IRON and the Global Campaign for Education helping us keep this event free. This is a chance for those of you who are in the room to let us know where you're participating from. Look to the left of the whiteboard. You're looking for some icons. The second one down is a star, or it looks like the sun. And you click on that twice and click on the map. And you can put a note in the chat. Time, temperature, anything else you think that we would like to know. Wherever you are, we are sure glad that you're participating. I think Don and I share Irish heritage, so of course we love seeing an Irish star on the map. I can't remember if I've ever told you, Don, but Hargadon is an Irish name from County Sligo. Your mic is off now. You can put it back on if you'd like. But I actually found the family farm a few years ago.
Wow, wow. Yeah, I wonder what it is in Gaelic, Steve. It'd be interesting. It's probably I don't know, O'Hargadon or something. O'Hargadon.
It's O'Hargadin.
O'Hargadin. Ah, okay. Interesting.
Apparently from the word silver.
Ah, from the word silver. And I guess there is no silver mine.
Okay, my job.
It's what?
I spoke over you. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say I don't think there are silver mines in that part of the country, in Sligo. There's definitely, yeah. Anyway, I wonder where, or maybe it's from silversmiths, family of silversmiths.
The legend is a pirate with a silver hand, but it's just a legend.
I see. Okay.
Okay, let's get going. Don, do you want to say anything before I turn this video on?
No, I want to start with this video because this is the inspiration for what I'm doing right now.
So, Don, you will want to turn your microphone off again while the video plays. I'm going to start this video. Those of you in the room, if you don't see the video start, I will also put the link in the chat, and you can click on that link and it should pull up in your own browser. So Don, I think you just wanted the first 90 seconds, right?
Yeah, great. Okay, so we got that. Great, thanks Steve for playing that video, and welcome to my keynote. Glad that you could make it today. It's been interesting looking at the chat. I'm getting sorely distracted here with it. But hopefully today I'm going to inspire you like the way I was inspired by that video that you just saw. So there's 3 really awesome things in that video. And if, you know, one is there's the kid that talks about my phone would talk to you, which we now know that as something like Siri. One of these students talks about the dual-sided camera. And a third kid talks about chocolate milk button. And what that kid is actually really getting to is app culture. And if I tell you right now that that video is almost 6 years old, I kid you not, 6 years old. So this is pre iPhone, without the camera, without Siri, etc. And that was a project that I did with a creative consultancy called Aruliden, which is based here in downtown New York, which is actually where I'm broadcasting from right now, 24th Street. Yeah, so here I am. This isn't the view of where I am looking at right now, but it's sort of close to it. And it was a project I did with a creative consultancy where we asked the kids to rethink the future of the cell phone. They were doing this project as a sort of a strategy information project with a, I will remain unnamed, big computer company who actually rejected these ideas. But, you know, I thought, oh my God, if you can, if kids can come up with these insights, you know, isn't it worth pursuing something like this? So that project had a ton of design and maker thinking in it. And who am I? Well, this is me here. I'm a co-founder of a not-for-profit called Children Schools. This is my 20th year in New York and my 20th year in education. In fact, I'm into my 5th career. Let me backtrack. I'm currently a social entrepreneur. Before that, I was a school administrator. I've been a director of curriculum. I've been a director of technology, director of innovation and technology. And prior to being an administrator, I was a teacher. I taught chemistry, physics. I taught nanotechnology. I taught Java programming. I taught e-business. And prior to being a teacher, I was a freelance photographer while pursuing my doctorate in London. And I did quite a bit of work in the music industry and fashion industry. And prior to being a photographer, I was actually an industrial chemist. So there you go. And right now, I'm the co-founder of Children Schools. I teach a graduate course at the Columbia's Teachers College. And most recently, I've just come back from Myanmar, where I worked at the International School of Yangon for 2 days. I worked with them in design thinking. And prior to that, I was in Bangkok, running a 2-day design thinking workshop for the Air Coast Business Institute. So Air Coast is the equivalent of NAIS, which is really the body that oversees the international school. So that gives you some sort of idea of where I am and what I'm up to. I want to start with some really sort of, you know, out there statements. A lot of you may have seen this one from Kathy Davidson. And, you know, I think it's a sort of very bold thing. She's saying 65% of today's grade school kids may end up at jobs that haven't been invented yet. And this, which is need a job, invented. And this really, I guess, it would be credited to Tony Wagner, you know, who says reinvent, re-engineer, reimagine the job. You know, he talks a lot about that because knowledge is available pretty much in every connected device. It matters actually far less, but really what matters is what you can do with it. And this is why I believe this design and maker thinking is a very important thing for us to bring into schools, and hopefully I can help you navigate this. But before we even get into defining design thinking or maker thinking, I want to really define innovation, because that's really what's behind these processes. And so I define innovation as the ability to see opportunity and exercising that opportunity to change mindsets. So if you have a problem, then that's an area of opportunity. And really, innovation is often talked about bringing the right side of the brain and the left side of the brain together to create holistic solutions. That's now disputed as well, because apparently there's theories that say there is no really right and left side of the brain, you know, but innovation always starts with blue sky ideas. So it's really lifting away any constraints you might have with something and thinking the impossible. And remembering that anything is possible, we just need to think about it a little differently. And, you know, there's an example of a great innovator in this slide. You can see the Virgin balloon up here, and, you know, that's a sort of tribute to Richard Branson, who we now know is going to bring people into space. You know, he dreamt this, and he will make it possible. And this is what innovation is, that anything is possible. We just need to think about it a little bit differently. So really, it's all about rethinking or reframing, as I call it. So rethinking and reframing are really important parts of innovation. I say here that innovation is the ability to seize the opportunity and exercising the opportunity to change mindsets. Now, the experts all agree that innovators have some unique characteristics. And there's 4 of them actually, and some of you, someone said they like that poster. Yes, so do I. So let's outline those. There's 4 things, and some of you will realize, oh my gosh, I'm innately an innate innovator. And you know, if you're not, you can develop these skills. So what is in the DNA of innovators? Well, the first thing that innovators are is they're really awesome observers. They're watching the world around them for surprising stimuli. And we talk about design thinking later on, if I ever get to it. I'll talk a lot about gaining empathy, and one way of gaining empathy, to see things from other perspectives, is to actually observe. Scientists do a lot of observing, but pretty much innovators observe, they look around, and they watch. The second thing is they always ask questions, and they don't ask questions for the sake of it, but asking probing questions that impose or remove constraints. Imposing a constraint can lead to actually solving a problem as removing a constraint. So there are 2 very important things that cover a huge landscape, actually adding a constraint and taking constraints away. So think about questions that remove constraints, like, you know, why is the door of your apartment in that place? Why does it have to be there? Let's take away that constraint. Third trait of an innovator is networking, and that's really interacting with people from different backgrounds who provide access to new way of thinking. And what I'm talking about there is that it's really good to network with people outside of your sort of comfort level of maybe, you know, if you're a physicist, well, why would you not think about going to an art conference? So really networking, or even go to a business conference. So networking is all about interacting with people from different backgrounds, because they actually sort of open up access to new ways of thinking for you. You know, they may remove constraints that you have on something. So very big deal trait of an innovator. And finally is experimenting. And that really is just complicating their life by trying new things or going to new places, taking a chance, experimenting, or as I say here, stepping out of line is a good thing. So, you know, think about those: experimenting, networking, questioning, and observing. 4 traits of innovators that you may not have those innately, but you can certainly develop them. And these are other very important things when we talk about innovation. I have added on here: collaborating, iterating, and communicating. You know, these are often all deemed as 21st century skills or 21st century competencies. And so the whole design thinking movement you know, is all design thinking and maker thinking has come out of what really are what I call sort of complex problems. You know, if you study systems theory, you'll be aware of simple problems, complicated problems, complex problems, and even ambiguous problems. And complex problems essentially are sort of can have multiple solutions and many ways of getting them. And that's the first thing we need to understand here, and why I think why these sort of two, design thinking and maker thinking, have come into vogue. The other thing you need to know is that you know, if you want to build a culture of innovation in your school, you really need to think about these processes of design thinking and maker thinking. So let's really define maker thinking. What is that? So really, it's related to the DIY mindset, which really refers to a process of thinking through making, sort of emphasizing tinkering, resourcefulness, and dare I say hacking, as sort of a bad word in some realms, but hacking really is repurposing. It's taking something apart and making it function so that it suits your needs and not what the person who maybe made or designed it for. The second thing that I'm sort of trying to talk about here and how do you bring it to schools is design thinking. And design thinking really is, I guess we could define it as a context-driven, human-centered problem-solving process that really emphasizes ideation. That's pushing out many ideas because your first idea may not be the best idea. It also encompasses learning from failure, which is so important that you can actually embrace failure and use it to move on and learn something from. It also, design thinking encompasses prototyping, which is testing and trying things out before you really think you have a full-blown solution. And really, it's about designing for the real world. You know, this is an example here of a methodology of design thinking that this design consultancy, aruliden, developed with me. And you can see here, there's like, you know, 9 steps in this process. But defining research, ideate, and prototype, very, very important steps to design thinking. There's a few different design thinking methodologies around. This one that you're looking at on the screen right now is from a design consultancy, Frog Design. You know, you can see here I'm mentioning the word design consultancy. Design thinking actually has come out of the work of designers, and because it's actually the way they solve problems, which they do every day. But this is the sort of Frog Design methodology of design thinking. This one comes out of the school on the West Coast, developed by the Innovator School, and a really amazing person out there called Kim Sachs. If you haven't heard of her, you should Google her. This is the methodology that they use with their students to get them to understand the design thinking and maker thinking mindset. And this really, I guess, is the original, which was really developed by IDEO, which is an innovation company started by David Kelly. If we lift back the slides here, I like this going back. You know, I mentioned the word IDEO here, and you see the D School. And the D School really, which is part of Stanford, is the one where design thinking is actually taught. But this is the methodology that IDEO, they're the world's biggest innovation company that really companies hire to solve problems and to innovate. You can see the 5 steps here: empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. And this is another design thinking methodology that actually comes from a woman called Mary Cantwell, who works in Atlanta at the Mount Vernon Prep, and it's called DEEP, Discover, Empathize, Experiment, Produce. And so, you know, we've defined design thinking, we've defined maker thinking, and what has come out of a lot of design thinking would be what you see right in front of you here on the screen. And if you're looking at me on the screen, you see some brainstorming ideas right behind me, you know, with all these Post-its. So you sort of got a reflection of Post-its behind Post-its in front. But this is an example of what's often called, an iLab, which is really when schools start to embrace design thinking, they often build iLabs. iLabs are, you know, not super common, but in a few West Coast schools, and that's because the D school and D thinking has all come out of there. But an iLab is essentially a room with a lot of whiteboards and sort of white walls where like you can write on those walls. It might encompass a lot of chart paper and sort of entail rapid prototyping materials, which we can talk about a little bit later. And the sort of physical space that's come out of the maker thinking culture that we've seen more of. I mean, it's unfair to say on the East Coast, but it's often called a fab lab or fabrication lab. And, you know, this is an example of a fabrication lab here that you're looking at, which is really the basis of maker thinking, or giving kids a space to make. And what's usually in a fab lab? Well, you'll find like laser cutters, plasma cutters, water jet cutters, CNC machines, 3D printers, circuit boards, microprocessors, and digital sort of electronics. So, you know, I've defined design thinking, I've defined maker thinking, and the sort of spaces, the physical spaces that manifest themselves in schools. But this is an example of a project I did a couple of years ago at School of Columbia, where what we did was we took 44 8th graders with the design consultancy that I actually worked with on the kids that you saw with the Talking of the Future cell phone. We got 44 8th graders, we got the whole 8th grade faculty on board, and we asked the kids to rethink the desk, chair, and locker. That's what this project was all about. And really, you know, it was a design brief on getting kids to rethink the desk, chair, and locker, but the process of thinking and problem solving behind it really was getting the kids, teaching the kids, getting to understand the design thinking process of defining problems, researching problems, ideating, and building out prototypes. Just showing you here that, like, if you look on the right-hand side, I have a schematic of an engineering design process, which is very similar to the design thinking process. Designers and engineers work in a very similar way, and actually any product designer eventually has to collaborate with an engineer, because when it comes out of the design phase and goes into the prototyping phase, that's where the engineers get involved and all that negotiation back and forth. And on the left-hand side, of my left, I guess you're right, is the scientific inquiry process. And that's, you know, quite different. People often think it's the same, but really the difference with engineering and design is that they're really grounded in, they're very goal-centered and apply to the real world, whereas, you know, the scientific inquiry process is often about communicating a hypothesis. But anyway, if you're trying to build a design thinking culture or making thinking culture, which is what I was trying to do with this project, it always starts with research and the big ideas. Research is like very important, and I often break down research in the realm of design thinking as looking at the history and looking at the landscape. So what's happened in the past and what's going on right now? Because if you don't look into the past and you're trying to solve a problem, you might find that problem's already been solved, and that's very important to define that problem. But also two ways of thinking about research: the history and the landscape. The second thing is that when you look at the landscape and you look what's out there, a big part of that is observations, much more than reading, but going out there and observing what are people doing, and also interviewing people. We built out these templates to help scaffold the kids' research, you know, with very sort of specific, well, posing questions that sort of added and removed constraint that would help them sort of gather their ideas about research. This, we're sort of, that gives you an example of the templates that we use to work through this project, just to help the kids scaffold them through it, you know, what inspired them, their research, and really then, when they got their research, getting them to define the problem and coming up with a solution, a really tricky bit. But this is a big part of design thinking, of identifying or defining a problem and coming up with a solution, and not just one solution, but many solutions. And when they come up with that, really then getting them to distill that solution down into one idea, you know, a big idea. These are examples of some of their inspiration boards. A big part of the design thinking process is the negotiation and back and forth. When you think you've come up with a solution, presenting those solutions to your colleagues, or in this case, we have them present them to, you know, someone from the MOMA Museum of Modern Art, to sort of editors of magazines, but really that whole idea of giving the kids communication tools so that they can help them express their ideas. This is a sample of one big idea that one of the kids came up with, which was is all about functionality. So when they dug deep and thought about what should a chair be like, you know, or I'm sorry, a desk in this case, that the desk has to be where functionality meets creativity. Somewhere therefore. So the next phase of the design thinking process is the ideation and mock-up. And that's really visualizing the big idea. They come up with a big idea, but you need to ideate it. So you must really draw those ideas out, as many as you can. The more ideations you have, the better. And this sort of was partway through the project. And Steve, I'm going to ask you to play the video here so I can have a quick break. It's about, like, I think 3-4 minutes. But it really explains the ideation process better than I can.
So Don, be sure to turn your microphone off. I'm going to play the video in the web tour as well. I'm putting the video in the chat, so if it doesn't show up for you in the web tour, do click on that link in the chat to have it play. Don, be sure to turn your mic back on.
Okay, I think it's on, right? I'm back. You guys can hear me? Great. You can hear me?
Don, I think it's off now.
How about this?
You're
Are
good.
we there? Yeah, I think we're on, right?
You are definitely on.
Okay, great. Yeah, so there you saw the sort of partway through the ideation phase of which sort of, you know, you're partway through the problem-solving process at this stage. Then, you know, after you ideate, you really get into prototyping, and prototyping is a really important thing, because what prototyping is trying out ideas. So it doesn't mean solving the problem completely, but what you think might be a solution, and prototyping and getting feedback. And that's a huge part of design thinking. These are all sort of prototypes of desks and chairs and locker here that you see. So prototyping, you know, is a big part of the Silicon Valley process. Some of you may have heard of the lean startup sort of methodology, which is a methodology that's used a lot in Silicon Valley, where all these startups out there, you know, they push their ideas out and get feedback early on in the stage of development, if you can call it that. So they don't spend a long time developing. They put an idea out there fast, get feedback, and based on that feedback, improve or throw the idea out. And that is a very important mindset to be teaching our kids in the 21st century, because that is the future. The future is about prototyping. The internet has sort of brought us to that. You know, after you prototype, then you really go into, like in this stage, we call it the 3D in manufacture, but you really come up with your solution. And that's what we did here. And you're looking at some final prototypes which we had built out in a factory down in North Carolina. I should tell you that this project was sponsored by a company called Bernhardt Design. They do a lot of work with actually design students in colleges, but they wanted to work with 8th graders and finance this whole project where the kids actually, they built out 10 chairs, 10 desks, and 10 lockers. But I think we brought 5 kids down here to help sort of, work on these prototypes. These are the final products and these are still, I guess, in the late prototype phase we call high-res prototype. You're looking at here, bringing them to the end of the sort of design and maker thinking mindset. So at the end of this, the kids had a really good understanding of this design thinking process or maker thinking process. That's all the final products here. The big added thing to this is that we then sort of these products went into a furniture show, International Contemporary Furniture Fair, and it got a lot of press coverage. It also was at the Museum of Art and Design, which really is a great way to validate kids' work. And that's something to think about. How do you validate kids' work? Isn't this really defining success? And how do you measure and define success and count it in schools? Just showing you here some of the awards that this got. So really, like if you were to do something like this, how do you do it? And I was, that project I guess was 2-3 years ago, and I've been working ever since trying to, scale this up and scale it down, which is why I formed this not-for-profit. With our idea is that it's co-founder with design consultancy, and the idea is that we want to bring this type of thinking into schools, and we want to partner with schools to actually do this. So we're in the funding stage right now where I'm actually looking for funding so we can actually do this. You saw this project earlier, which was more of a strategy, I guess, based project, the future of the cell phone. Here's another one that I've got involved with, which was kids rethinking the sneaker. And I guess these really are the successes of what I thought about the tools for schools. There was a competitive atmosphere built with the kids. Diversity of topics, prototyping huge, and the realization when kids actually see that their idea is being realized, it's hugely important. But I think the big takeaway here is bringing the outside in, and I think that's often called education 3.0. I think schools have to start bringing the outside in, bringing in real problems for kids to solve, and bringing in professionals to actually work with them. Like, why is it such a big deal if professionals are working with kids on something? I'm prototyping a project right now, which we've called the future of the dry erase pen. And what that's about, I have kids working simultaneously with designers to actually think about the future of the dry erase marker, I should say, as opposed to the dry erase pen. And so it's sort of interesting. The kids are really interested in this because they see it as, oh, this is a real world thing and we're trying to solve this problem. And they really are sort of, the designers that are working on this are really surprised with kids' insights, and kids become more and more interested in the project because they see that some in the real world are taking their insights and trying to applying it to solve this problem. So I'm in the prototyping phase of this not-for-profit that I set up to try and, bring this to other schools. Of course, here are the big challenges with something like this. If you bring the outside in, how do you convince teachers to give up part of their schedule, part of other skills that they might be teaching? Where does it fit into a traditional curriculum? Well, that's the $50 million question. But we need to think about legacy and future content, like what content is relevant that we're teaching. And really, like I said earlier, that quote from Tony Wagner, because knowledge is available on sort of every internet-connected device. Why what you know matters far less than what you can do with what you know. And this is the thing here about, legacy and future content. Time, and as I said, how do you measure success? Again, not to dwell on Tony Wagner, but I think he really gets this. It's like, I think he says something like, sometimes, you just can't count what needs to be counted, something to that effect. So, where does this go? Well, I think we want to bring this to other schools, and that's what I'm working on right now. And I have a lot of volunteers working with me trying to realize this not-for-profit we're getting off the ground, but we're serious about it. And hopefully it will happen. So what I want to leave you with are questions. So why is design thinking important in education? Can schools develop a lean startup mindset? How can schools develop a maker and design thinking mindset, which we saw through here? And how and why is this thinking relevant? Is it relevant? Should we be teaching this in schools at all? And where does this type of problem solving fit into the current education landscape? And finally, how can this sort of thinking be integrated into education? So I want to leave you with those questions, and actually, hopefully you have questions for me. I want to thank you for your time and listening to me, and hopefully I'll be getting some questions that I'll hopefully be able to answer. Thank you.
Thanks, Don. Okay, I'm clapping for you, which I do by hovering over the smiley face and going down to the applause icon, which is not easy in this system, but if you have a question for Don, you can raise your virtual hand. That's the hand icon, the third icon over in the participant, or you can put a note in the chat. We have a little bit of time. We probably should finish with about 10 minutes before the hour so that people can take a break before the next set of sessions.
Someone asked, were there other parts of videos? Yeah, that's a 6-part series. If you Google it, you find it. I think if you go onto the not-for-profit website, Tools at School, they're actually all on there. But I showed you the middle one. There's a 6 videos, about 3-4 minutes each.
Don, you have a couple of questions.
Okay.
One is, how do you measure success? Rubrics maybe, but what is in them, and do they list the joy and the strengthening of acts of students?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the problem with a project like this, is that you can't measure it in a traditional way because it's complex. I mean, I think the definition of success is like really up to how you define it. In this case, these were kids that camped out the whole weekend to talk to, when they had this booth at the furniture fair, to actually tell people about their ideas. So I think, as educators, like if you're dealing with something simple or complicated, it's easy to assess it. But with something like this, it's very hard. I mean, I don't know, the full answer to this of how do I define the success of this. The students are interested. Even with this project on the future of the dry erase pen, which my co-founder, Renata Rue, is working on with me with UNIS, United Nations International Schools. When these kids see their insights put into the work of designers, they are so engaged. I mean, they will ask, questions for an hour, and there'll be like silence in the room. They're so engaged. I mean, to me, that's the definition of success, engaged kids who want to learn.
Okay, Don, you have some more questions? Do you think that we need to go back to the vocational education model in the U.S.?
I don't know. I mean, I think vocational education model, I don't know if that's what this is. I guess I don't know what's vocational about this. I mean, just because they're making something, that's one part, is the making, physically making it. But there's a lot of thinking and negotiation involved in this problem-solving methodology. If you're specifically talking about the maker piece, I think that's just come around because it's very easy nowadays to, 3D print. We can get stuff really, really far, really, really quickly. Traditionally you'd have made stuff with like low-res, really quick mock-ups, but now kids can actually do much more sophisticated printing. But is the vocational fit? I guess, we are going back in a way to a bit of a DIY culture. If you think about our technology, I think the idea that we all personalize our own technology has made us all sort of tinkerers and sort of be a bit more resourceful in a way. And I don't know about going back to vocational technology, but I think there's an uprise of people sort of making stuff again. As I mentioned earlier, this DIY mindset. which is really all about repurposing and hacking and, emphasizing tinkering and stuff like that.
Dimitri wants to know, how do you implement such programs in rigid school programs?
You can't implement this in a rigid school program. There has to be buy-in for the leadership, and that's why I'm working right now. I have four or five entrepreneurs helping me poke holes in this idea that Renat, my co-founder, and I had. And they're really saying, well, Don, how will a high school, they're asking these questions, how is a high school principal, what's going to turn them on to that? And this is what we have to figure out. Like, if you think about independent schools, they like this sort of stuff because it puts their school on the map. But, if a school is really successful by the standards of, test scores, they have absolutely no incentive to do something like this. But to me, this is about student engagement. Kids are engaged in this sort of thing. But really, to get buy-in, if you have a rigid school system, I don't know how you apply that. If it's a rigid school system that's not doing very good, maybe you could bring in this as a turnaround program, But if it's a rigid school system that's doing amazing with test scores, where's the incentive for them to change?
Don, Allison wants to know if you'd be interested in homeschool groups joining the project.
Say that again, Steve?
Allison wanted to know if you'd be interested in homeschool groups joining the project.
Homeschool. Yeah, you know what? That's an interesting idea. I haven't even thought about that, but yes. You're the first person that's brought up homeschool, and we've been through, charter schools, private schools, public schools, alternative schools, what's the hook we need to get these guys interested in. I'm adding homeschool onto that, actually, for our next meeting. Thanks, Allison.
Okay, and Vanessa wants to know, how do schools afford Tools for Schools? It seems like an expensive program, and will it create a bigger gap between low-income and higher-income students?
Well, that's why I started a not-for-profit, and I'm looking for funding, because the idea is that this will be free for schools that can't afford it. If schools could afford it, they would pay, but we're certainly aware of the equity issue and, are working on that. That's why I have a funding volunteer really trying to find foundations that will fund this. But of course, this is not going to be funded by a foundation that wants data. I don't have any data. I have proof of concept is what I have. I have no data, and people have to take a chance on this. But the idea is to actually get this funded so that it is free to schools who cannot afford it. But I do believe if schools can afford this type of project, that they can also pay for it. They would need to see value in that. The other way I'm thinking about this, I showed you an example of a sort of design thinking and maker thinking through working with kids. But this is also important to build this culture of innovation among teachers. So I'm also looking at a professional development model and how we can actually get this sort of mindset going with teachers, and then maybe that would spill down to kids where teachers actually, are really interested in working on a project like this. So that's another thing I'm looking at right now, because this organization is in its infancy and we're still prototyping and looking for partners and looking at other ways that we might bring this into schools.
Don, I didn't know who asked this question, but the question is, who facilitates the majority of these design thinking activities in schools? A motivated teacher or outside organizations?
Yeah, that's the other big question here. I think, if you look at the PD model, we'd be training teachers to actually help with this. But you also need someone who's trained in the realm of design thinking, and the designers also need part of the process. So this is really about team teaching. And, I'm looking at models of whether my organization actually, trains people and I have them in-house and I pay for them to go into schools and do this, or do we actually, we're also looking at the model of how can we just train people within schools so that they're there constantly to do this stuff. There are other models I'm looking at, and I think, I might end up with a hybrid Like, do I have a whole staff of people that go to schools and do this, or do I just go around and train people within schools? So that's where I'm still prototyping and testing out these ideas.
Don, two questions I think you will appreciate, both about online learning. One is, do you know of this type of an educational innovation being done online? And the other is, how would we incorporate design thinking, maker thinking in online courses?
Oh my God. So difficult. There is someone trying to do an online version of this. It's called Nuvu Studios. It's based out of Boston. A guy called Saeed. That's the first thing you could look up if you're interested in this online. I've taught two design thinking courses online. It's quite difficult to translate design thinking into an online environment, and here's why. Design thinking is essentially a studio-based process that really involves a lot of negotiation. What I found is when you translate this process online, particularly into an asynchronous environment, the whole process gets exaggerated and extended out, and people get frustrated. So I think if you did do an online version of this, there has to be some sort of synchronous thing involved where you really, when you're throwing out ideas, you want really quick feedback. So, you know, again, think about online as not a substitute for offline, but as a complement. And I think educators have to get their heads around this. There's some things, I believe, that don't necessarily work as well online. And actually, Lucy Gray, who's works with Steve on this, co-director, co-organizer, and I, with Karen Blumberg, are doing a session at EduCon in Philly in in January, EduCon 2.6, and it's called Read This, Watch This, Do This. And it's really about the pluses and minuses of online learning and Conference 2.0, which is what this is right now. I mean, you know, you think about what me on here live, but would you get much more from this if you were in a physical venue with me and I could see your faces and interact with you? You know, I mean, I can on the chat. It's a very different experience. And I guess the short answer is it's possible to do part of this online. I don't know if it's possible to do all of it online. But it would be quite a different experience.
Don, I think we'll make this the final question. The question is, do you think this Tools for Schools would be powerful even if it didn't get to the manufactured prototype?
Oh my God, awesome question. I just had this conversation earlier with my co-founder, Renat, and my simple answer is yes. Because the other thing I started thinking about this is that, you know, I'm passionate about getting kids and teachers and everyone to use design thinking in their everyday. But the other thing is that now I'm thinking, well, maybe I need to get involved in more strategy type projects, or what are often called North Star. They're actually just about ideas that may never go to markets. But that's a really important thing for kids to learn. You know, just because they come up with these solutions, well then, how do you get this to market? Is there a niche market? Is it a big market? Who's going to fund this? You know, and I think that's still, they can still learn the design thinking product even though the realization doesn't happen. I think realization is awesome, and we're all thrilled when our ideas are realized, but we also have to learn that sometimes our ideas aren't realized, and we have to deal with that. I'm prototyping another Tools for Schools project with some kids learning engineering. Someone trying to FaceTime me from London. So I'm prototyping this engineering and interaction design class, really, where I'm actually pushing kids with what they're learning in electrical engineering to see if any of these products they might be thinking about making, we could actually crowdsource on something like Kickstarter. But the short answer to your question is I don't think it's fine as a strategy exercise without the realization that kids can learn a lot. it would be a different outcome and maybe, you know, a different sort of measure of success.
John, let's stop there so people have a chance to take a break before the next set of sessions. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. It's been awesome.
I've really enjoyed being your moderator without having to click the button every time you told me to.
You need to tell the audience about that torture that I went through before, Steve.
Thanks, Don. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Got a great set of sessions coming up right now. We actually have 5 sessions starting at the top of the hour, so take your break and join us for one if you would. Take care, Don. Take care, everybody. Bye now.